Welcome to the Piece of Me podcast. This is your space for all things peace, positivity, and finding balance to live your best life. Life gets busy, and at times it's messy. I'm here to help you clean things up and put peace back in its place. I'll share tips, ideas, interviews, mindset shifts, and fresh perspectives to help you along the way. Hi friends, it's Lexi Lee. If you're new here, welcome. And if you're not new, then welcome back and thanks for coming back to the podcast. I'm so glad you'll be joining me for today's episode, which is all about one person's struggle with food. Now, in a recent episode on the Piece of Me podcast, we wrapped up the mental health awareness series episodes. But this conversation that I'm about to share could easily have been a part of that. Now, my guest today is going to share their battle with food addiction, their weight loss journey, and how they fought to heal through it. And I also think you'll appreciate the timing of this episode because it's June, and June means summer. That can also mean less clothing, swimsuits, being at the pool, more photos being snapped and uploaded to social media feeds, and just being concerned with how we look. The struggle is real, and you're not alone. I think you'll find it refreshing if you too are stressing about summer. And you might also find it refreshing that this conversation, it happened with a guy named Frank. Let's listen in. Today, I am joined by Frank. So Frank, welcome to the Piece of Me podcast.
Thank you, Lexi. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. So before we dive into your story, which I'm really excited for the listeners to hear about, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
I'd love to. I am 48, soon to be 49 years old, originally from New York State, the Albany capital area. I now live in Florida. I am a lifelong entrepreneur, currently run a firm that does business consulting and helps entrepreneurs get into or out of business.
Awesome. And we're really thankful and appreciative to have you on the podcast because I think that your story is really going to hit home. And when the listeners hear this, it's going to be right at kind of the beginning of summer. And I think your story is very unique. So I don't want to share it. I will let you do that. But tell us what it is that you went through.
So I used to identify as being heavy all the time. Heavy child, heavy adolescent, heavy teen, heavy person well into my 20s and 30s. And I attribute that to a number of things, my Italian culture and upbringing. Most everything in life revolves around food in some way. If you're happy, of course, there's food to celebrate. If you're sad, there's food to make you feel better. And food gets used as a reward for good deeds or for learning something or doing something well. So that combined with the ultimate for a child is to have parents' approval. And my father, may he rest in peace, was a great man and one of those that everything that I ever did was never good enough. And so without that approval, that creates a source of emotional pain. And anyone that's had any type of addiction, whether it's food or anything else, will agree that any addiction starts with some type of pain, which you are looking to cover up. And that was the situation with me. And so my drug of choice, if you will, was food.
Now, you said a couple things that I thought were really interesting. You identified yourself as heavy, and you also mentioned that everything revolves around food. And I absolutely agree with you because whether it's whatever we're doing, all of our get-togethers, there's always food. It's always there. Now, you say that it was an addiction. So at what point did you realize that it wasn't maybe just overeating, but more of an addiction, like you said?
That's the beauty of what I went through, because I really never knew any of that until I was well into my journey to reverse that trend and did a lot of work internally, including hiring a mindset coach who pointed that out. And it was a massive light bulb that opened up because everything made sense. I would use food to alleviate the pain, which is what any addict will do. And the identity of being heavy going as far back as I can remember, took on different names, whether it was husky or big boned or big for their age or anything of the sort. Call it whatever you want. It wasn't until after I had my own epiphany that's truly what my path used to be and how it's so much different now. That for me changed in the year 2014. It really great timing that this episode will air in early June because it was right around then, mid to late June, that I made the decision that I was going to change and reverse this trend because I turned 40 in September of that year. And I wanted, by the time that 40th birthday came around, to be well on my way to a new path, to feel better, to drop weight, to uh, live a lot longer. Because anyone that goes to the doctor on a regular basis, they will tell you that after age 40, you've got all these additional risks health wise that could come into play when you're carrying extra weight. And my story was no different. I heard it from the doctor almost every year. As a matter of fact, his famous words were, the magic number is 40. The magic number is 40. So that was always tucked in the back of my mind that this is my year. This is the year where I'm going to do things a lot differently because I made it to almost 40 and I want to make it for another 40 and well beyond that.
I understand that completely. And I think you and I were sharing offline that, 40 is such an age where it really helps you realize things. There's a bit of clarity with the age of 40. So I can appreciate what you're saying. And you mentioned the word husky now. So when you talk about your weight, what did that number look like when you say heavy or husky?
It looked way, way, way too big for my stature from really grade school age. There's certain points that I remember specifically as a boy that was not even 10 years old, weighing well over 100 pounds, all the way up to my highest point ever. And thank God I'm nowhere near there now, a 408, where my pant size, and for the men that are in the audience, they'll really understand this. I was at a size 58, 5'8" at my absolute heaviest. And today I'm proud to say that I'm almost out of the pant sizes that start with the number 4, which for men, that's typically where when you get above that, you have a greater chance for insulin resistance and visceral fat gathering around your abdominal area, which is super dangerous for your health, for your cardiovascular system. The weight to the number on the scale has significance, but I couldn't even tell you what I have now for a weight because I haven't stepped on a scale in a long time. I focus more on how I feel, my energy level, and tangibly, how do the clothes fit? What size do I now require to get into?
Sure. Now, you mentioned the mindset coach before. Did you decide to see the mindset coach before you turned 40?
I knew about him as I started down the path. I didn't actually engage him until I was probably 40 and a half or so.
Okay. Now, did they help you kind of have this epiphany, or did it, like, what kind of really, I mean, I know you said when you turned 40, it kind of sparked, but when did you kind of, I guess, decide you just wanted to live a different life?
So I wanted to make a change because my birthday's in September, when the summer months came around is when it started to hit me. Because when it's warmer, you want to wear short sleeves, you want to wear less clothing, you want to go to the beach and feel comfortable in a bathing suit. And I looked at that summer as being my runway, if you will, to making a change and to feeling better. Because when you carry so much extra weight, you become self-conscious. And you combine that with another aspect of my Italian culture, which a lot of cultures share, which is you focus on what other people are going to say or what they're going to think. And that used to be what really ruled a lot of what I did and said in life. And thankfully now that's not the case anymore. It's not a factor for me. What matters to me is what I think, and more importantly, how I feel.
Hmm. Absolutely. And I like that you said, you're more focused on how your clothes feel and your health instead of just a number, because I actually do have an episode that is all about accepting the number on the scale and not putting our value based on what a number is. So I really appreciate what you're saying there. Now, you obviously had to go through so much to get to where you are now. You've been through such a journey and a lot of struggle, I'm sure. So how much weight have you lost now? You did say you're finally the waist size is now much closer to where you are. You've certainly made a lot of improvements there, but how much weight have you lost? How are you mentally? How did you get to where you are now? Like, I guess there's a lot of questions there, but how are you doing today?
Yeah, there's quite a few. So people ask me that number all along the journey, and so my knee-jerk answer was always none. I didn't lose any weight because I don't refer to it that way anymore. I refer to it as what I released or what I let go of. And the number was well over 200 pounds at one point. During COVID, I, as well as so many others out there, put some extra weight on because of just what was going on in the world. And you had really nothing else to do but stay home and just eat things that you wouldn't typically eat. Couldn't even go to the gym if you could, or get outside to exercise without being told, hey, you can't do that. So I definitely added some during COVID, but thankfully that's all been reversed. And the entire set of my results, I believe, is firmly as a result of the changes I made in just fundamental habits in the decisions I made every day. Fundamental things like my nutrition, my sleep, how much water I drank. Those are things that a lot of people don't do a great job at. They carry it almost as a badge of honor. And it makes me sad because your body requires a certain amount of sleep. And bragging that you can, quote unquote, get by with 4 or 5 hours, to me, that's nothing to brag about. You're slowly doing damage to your body over a long period of time if you're not sleeping enough. So putting all those things together became the recipe for me for being and having so much success. And now fast forward to essentially 9 years later, I'm a very different person physically as well as on the inside because of the work that I did. And the coach came into play somewhat through my journey because I had at that point in time probably released about 100 or 120 pounds. And I tell people that at that point, I was the weight loss equivalent of a dry drunk, a term that a lot of people know from Alcoholics Anonymous, where you're not drinking anymore, but you really haven't gotten to the core of what got you there to begin with. And so it was that work with the coach and with a lot of reading and exposing myself to a lot of new material that I truly learned what led me to get to that 408 number and that size 58 in my clothes, and how vowing not to go back to those behaviors has really made a difference for me.
So I'm hearing a lot of personal accountability and really like you're not putting any blame. I mean, you mentioned your upbringing and kind of the culture you grew up in and environmental factors, but you're not blaming anybody. You're taking a lot of personal accountability.
Absolutely. I know now what led me to that point, but nobody really forced you to do that. What happens a lot is people use guilt to try to control what you're doing. So you sit down for a meal and a family member might say, you don't want any more? I worked for 2 days to make that. And they use that guilt to, quote unquote, make you feel bad about not eating that second plate. When if you eat at the proper pace and you eat the right foods, your body's own satiety index will kick in and you'll know when you've had enough. But a lot of people eat way too fast. They eat faster than that index keeps up with them. And that's what gives you that food baby kind of feeling that people have at Thanksgiving or at other holidays, because you're eating faster than your body can keep up with you. But no, there's no blame to be laid on. I accept full accountability for the choices that I made in the past. If you want better results, you make better choices. And I'm living, breathing proof of that.
And that really says a lot. You know, I've interviewed other people who I've noticed the common theme is really personal accountability. And I don't want this episode to get in the direction of we're telling everybody to lose weight or anything like that. But this is for, I shouldn't say we all, but many of us struggle with weight. And a lot of our audience tends to be a little bit more women. We do have obviously male listeners, but we do skew a little bit more women. So I think women might be a little surprised that they're hearing this from you, from a guy. This might be a little bit of a shift. So let me ask you this. Do a lot of men worry about their weight or their appearance?
No, quite the opposite. Most of them wait until the doctor tells them do this or else. I firmly believe you can make changes two ways, out of inspiration or out of desperation. And I chose inspiration. I chose the ability to not go back to the doctor after the age 40 for that 40-year-old exam and hear the same lecture. When I went back, I was thrilled that my own doctor barely recognized me because I had dropped so much weight. And when I went into the room, he came in with a big smirk on his face, or a smile rather, not smirk. And he said, "How much?" And I looked at him for a minute and I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "How much weight are you down? You look phenomenal. I barely recognized you." And he was thrilled with what happened. I shared what I was doing, and he gave me those words that a lot of doctors use all the time. It's working. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it.
Absolutely. And I love what you said about the guilt of that you get from other people, and it could be even friends who are saying, "Hey, why aren't you drinking with me? Why aren't you having a drink?" But you mentioned, because I'm thinking of different situations, but absolutely a family member or a parent saying, "I've taken so much time to make this meal for you," and almost guilting you because they maybe assume that you seem ungrateful for the meal because you're not finishing it because you ate only what you're comfortable with, but there's that pressure. And that makes me think of just the pressure. We do get pressure from our peers, pressure from our family. And then I also think about diet culture. And there's so much pressure in diet culture and especially social media feeds that I talk a lot about here on the podcast that, I mean, you open up Instagram and there is no end to how much is in your feed when it comes to whoever's losing weight or what the new thing is, whether it's counting macros and all the things. There's so much out there. Do you think diet culture, in your own opinion, did it kind of influence you at all to lose this weight? Like, how did that play into your whole struggle with food addiction?
I'm proof that diets don't work. The months leading up to my turning 40, by no means was that ever the first time in my life that I quote unquote tried to lose weight. I had probably tested many of the quote fad diets out there over my life, and they don't work for the simple reason that when you're on a diet and you are depriving yourself of those things that you enjoy, eventually you're going to form resentment toward yourself, and you're going to feel entitled, and you're going to see the low fat, so to speak, ice cream out there, and you'll buy it and you'll eat the entire half gallon because it's low fat. The reality is, if you want the ice cream, be cognizant of your choices, know what that's going to do, know what you're going to do to counteract that physically, and have the ice cream. The low fat stuff out there is just another word for chemicals. They're not good for you, and you'll have much better results if you change your habits and look for slow, consistent results over time. My journey was well over 2 years, and you really never arrive because it allowed me to break the food addiction. It allowed me to get more educated about food, how powerful it is in either a positive or a negative way, how it can do more for you to build up or destroy your body than any medication you could ever take. And the knowledge of knowing what's healthy to eat and what isn't is super, super powerful.
I agree. And it sounds like you just did so much. You mentioned, internal work and your research and again that personal accountability. You did so much to really understand this, learn what you could to make such a lifestyle change. And I'm thinking about people who are listening to this right now who want to get to where you are. They want to have that kind of internal motivation, like you said, inspiration, not desperation. They want to get to that point, but maybe they're not there yet, or they're struggling with something and they just kind of feel like they want to make a change, but they're not quite at the point where they're going to make a change. Do you have any advice for someone who's maybe in that position?
What worked for me, speaking of accountability, was putting it out there. And a lot of people are afraid of putting themselves out there And that, I believe, is all driven by the fear of the opinions of others. I made a post. I still remember to this moment where I was when it was July 1st, 2014, about my decision to make changes in my life, staring down the barrel of the gun of my 40th birthday being 2.5 or so months away. I believe that if you put that out there, you're going to have a bunch of accountability partners and cheerleaders all rolled into one. So the best advice I can give to somebody who knows they want to do better for themselves, but isn't ready to completely go for it, is to first make the decision to change. Secondly, understand that you will not get the results overnight. We live in a I want it now culture, and that those are not the results that will sustain you long term. It's all about learning better habits, healthier habits, implementing them one at a time. The easiest one that people can start with, and this works for men and for the ladies, is your water consumption. Most people don't drink enough. The commonly accepted guideline is 1/2 your body weight in ounces of water every day. I start my day with anywhere from 16 to 24 ounces when I first put my feet on the ground in the morning, and I'm constantly drinking water throughout the day. It's truly one thing that anybody can do. It's as close to free as you can possibly get. Just open the tap if you don't want to buy bottled water, and you'll feel the difference on the insides and on the outsides.
So really, whatever it is that you're going through, and obviously we're talking about food addiction and making a lot of personal changes for your health and well-being, but it's almost sounding like start small, start doing certain little things here and there and making those things be consistent and habitual. That's what it sounds like to me. Now, I'm thinking too, as you're saying this, I was a little surprised when I asked you if men care about their weight and you said no, and you said it quickly. That kind of surprised me. And knowing again that we have a lot of women listening to this podcast, a lot of women though feel the pressure about, what, especially in the beginning of summer, whether maybe they still have COVID weight that they haven't yet lost. Maybe they've had a baby recently, or maybe they've just been busy with life and enjoying life and they're just not feeling their best. Let me ask you this. I know you can't speak for all the men out there, but do men really judge women by their weight?
In as much as it shows up in their physical appearance. Men are visual, women tend to be more emotional. So ladies are brought up with the idea driven into their head to do things a certain way because, again, it goes back to that impression. What are people going to think? What are people going to say? And some of that evolves around what you look like physically, how much weight you're carrying. And I know deep down men care about the weight when it impacts them, but women are more proactive when it comes to their health in general. Let's face it, men don't like to go to the doctor by and large. They go when they have to, or they go when something goes wrong. Ladies tend to be more preventative when it comes to that and go for their checkups and do the right things. A lot of men, by and large, wait until something breaks, so to speak. And that, I believe, is the fundamental difference.
Mm. And you mentioned, caring about what other people think. And it's so hard to get to a place where you don't care what others think. Have you had any success in that area? And if you have, how did you get there where you maybe don't care what other people think? Or any advice you have for people if they don't want to care what other people think?
I believe a lot of people will give you the knee-jerk answer that they don't care what people think. But my advice is look yourself in the mirror and see if you can say that to yourself. And not caring what people think, to me, has a certain meaning in that it's not a license to be a jerk, but it's also at the same time not meant to have the opinions of others drive your own decisions. And the first step, as it is with most anything, is to decide, to commit to not letting that influence you. Rate your own opinion of yourself way above anybody else's opinion of you. And there's a great book that I read. It's a book, but it's really more of a workbook. Couldn't recommend it more strongly to everybody out there, men and women. It's called Letting Go by David Hawkins. He passed away now, but he had an MD and a PhD, and he's written several books on the topic of mindset, levels of consciousness. But this one here really breaks down from a scientific standpoint, but in really understandable English, how you can get to that point where what other people think does not impact you in any way.
That sounds like a really good read. Now, I'm also thinking about if you have somebody listening right now who hasn't put the work in yet, wants to put in the work, but summer is here, they're not feeling their best, and they're trying to let go of what others think. They're again haven't maybe done all the work yet. They're a work in progress like we all are. How do you enjoy summer when you're not at maybe your ideal level of fitness, or you're not wearing your pants don't fit as comfortably as they did last summer? How do you enjoy summer when you don't feel your best?
You start by appreciating the fact that you were given another day by God, no matter what season it's in, and understanding that those pants don't fit the same now because of what you decided to do between last summer and now. And have that thought be in your head when you're exposed to those things that are going to result in weight gain: alcohol, fried foods, the fatty things. We all know the quote unquote bad foods for us. Most people understand what works and what doesn't work. And it's a decision to put the right things into your body. And it's not all or nothing, because that won't work. People will develop resentment and they'll just quit. But it's those little changes that you stay with over time. It's going out, enjoying social time, but not necessarily having as many alcoholic drinks as you did before. If you tend to choose to have that, switch it up. What's nice about now that we didn't have in 2014 is this development of these mocktails that are out there, and they're much more mainstream, and you can learn about them, and restaurants and bars are starting to serve them, because the idea of not drinking alcohol either ever again or cutting way back is starting to gain some traction. And so the market is responding to that by offering people solutions that don't always contain alcohol.
That's a great point. And I just see that a lot more too, a lot more recipes, so many fun. It really sounds like what you're saying is you can still enjoy your summer, but if there is a place you're trying to get to, then choose things in moderation and don't cut everything out. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. You mentioned before how it can get resentful. If you mentioned that low calorie ice cream, that you can have the things that you want. You can still enjoy your summer, and you just have to be cognizant of what you're doing and just choose different options, make better choices.
Just think of it as being in a marathon, not a sprint. And you, as someone who didn't run for the longest time, and I started a few years ago, was petrified of running a 5K until I did it. And my running coach at the time, I remember him saying to me, "Frank, you don't have to finish first, but you do have to finish. So if you're walking because you want to take a breath, give your body some time to recover, fine, but finish the race." And that's what it's all about.
I love that. You don't have to finish first, you just have to finish. That's great advice. I think that can apply to a lot of things in life too. That's really awesome. Now, as we kind of wrap up this conversation, what what advice do you have maybe that you were given along your journey that you just found to be the best advice that you'd like to share with the listeners, who might either be trying to start a health and wellness journey, or overcome things, whether it's just the way that they look at themselves, or just trying to get into a better place? What advice would you have for them to help support them?
Your best results, your best chance of having success will come from the environment. And we all have a significant amount of control over the environment. And that's the people that you surround yourself with, the ideas, the words. Negative is not just poor food choices, it's also toxic information you take into your brain. And the more you can eliminate that or minimize it, the better you're going to feel. If someone's calling you with gossip, I firmly believe if someone gossips to you, they'll gossip about you. So separate yourself from that And then surround yourself with people that have the same goals, because then you'll have a cheering section. I was fortunate to have that when I started on my journey because of the choices that I made. But your environment dictates a lot about whether you will or will not succeed.
That's great advice. Absolutely. And I think a lot of that applies to so many situations too. Just you do have a lot of options, even if you feel stuck, even if you feel you don't, you can choose who you surround yourself with, who's in your circle, all the things, the choices that you make. Those are all things you can choose. So, is there anything else, Frank, that maybe I haven't thought to ask you that you'd like to share with the audience or leave them with any final words?
Start before you're ready. People tend to say, I'm going to start eating healthy, but insert but. I'm going on vacation. I'll start when I come back. Or it's the holidays. I'll start on January 2nd. We all know that's the busiest time of the year for any health club, the first 3 weeks in January. The best time to start was a long time ago. The second best is right now. It doesn't have to be perfect. You will learn along the way, but it all starts with a decision. It's the thoughts that you have. We all have control over those. And be super mindful about what you say to yourself. Most people say things to themselves they wouldn't dream of saying to anybody else, friend or foe. Your subconscious does not know the difference when you're joking around or not. So what you tell yourself is what your subconscious will program you to follow.
That's great advice. And thank you so much for sharing such a personal journey. Again, I think the listeners are going to be surprised that this came from a guy, and not necessarily a woman, but it's really refreshing to hear your side of things. Somebody who has been through the trenches, has dealt with this for a long time, that we're all going through something. We all have our own battles internally at different times, and you've overcome this. You've gotten to such a great place. So thank you again for sharing this on the Piece of Me podcast.
Thank you for the opportunity. I really hope that someone out there who maybe aligns themselves with the prior version of me, somebody who's carrying extra weight, is looking at some milestone birthday. That's what it was for me. Do it before the doctor tells you to do it, and you'll feel better about it later.
Awesome. Well, Frank, thank you again for being here. And maybe we'll get to catch up with you again on your journey in the near future.
I appreciate that. It's been fun.
I've created this space to help you live your best life. If you want to help support the podcast in return, I'd be forever grateful of your support. Please give this show a review on iTunes or share an episode with a friend. You can also join me at peaceofmepodcast.com. That's peaceofmepodcast.com, and stay connected.